It is November 20th, 2025, and Oklahoma State has not hired a head coach for football yet. What does that mean? What's the outlook? We have so much to talk about here in the Markcast, a jam-packed show. As you can see on the screen, we've got a lot to get into, from the outlook of Oklahoma State's search to who are the actual candidates right now, my personal top 5 for the job, and questions from you guys regarding the Oklahoma State head coach football job. This is a really busy show, so stick with me. We'll try to get through all of it as fast as I can. Look, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I can't tell you about, that Cody can't tell you about, that even Robert Allen can't tell you about. Sources are kind of a finicky thing. You can't just say everything that you're hearing. For example, a great example recently, Colin Klein. Donors were going out, were fed information. Hey, Colin Klein is the next head coach of Oklahoma State. Those donors go and pass it on to a source that sends that information out to the people. Those sources did that. For example, I relay the news that, hey, donors are saying that Oklahoma State is the next head coach. Doesn't end up happening. Those sources now do not get fed information. So you have to be careful to what sources that you actually get, how much of that information that you put out there, which is why sometimes you only see me putting out snippets. So I can only tell you what I can tell you, of course, without burning my source or getting someone in hot water. But today, we're going to tell you quite a bit, and it's going to be fun. Look, the first thing that we need to talk about is the outlook of the Oklahoma State job. And this is where it starts, because I can't say everything, every detail that's happening behind the scene. One, because nobody knows every detail that's happening behind the scene. No one really knows what conversation Chad has had on the phone or sat down and interviewed him, what those conversations look like. You can only say what we know, and the outlook of the Oklahoma State job started off really, really good, and that's because the resources were on the table. We put everything out there. We're saying, hey, we've got the money, and again, finances aren't the issue for Oklahoma State. We can offer money up there with the best of the best in terms of head coaches' salaries and coordinator salaries, and all that good stuff. So that isn't an issue for Oklahoma State, and so attracting big names and having conversations with names that would probably floor you guys hasn't been an issue. We've had conversations with just about anyone that you can imagine, or at least tried to have conversations with anyone you can imagine. The issue for Oklahoma State is, what does our alignment look like? This is something that Josh Pate talks a lot about in head coaching search, and I actually think it's really relevant to the Oklahoma State job. And it's one of the reasons that, for example, it's not a guarantee that Lane Kiffin goes to LSU. Just like it's not a guarantee that Eric Morris or Alex Golesh or whoever else comes to Oklahoma State, is because the alignment at OSU is really bad. And I'm not going to get into all the details to what that looks like, but the recent Board of Regents, president change, head coaching firing, all that mess with the media, how all of that was presented was really poor. And it scares coaches. While Oklahoma State is presenting an incredible package and an incredible offer to these coaches about what the future looks like for our football program, and yes, that excites them, and it's getting them at the table, the issue has been, what is your alignment? What is the alignment between the president and the Board of Regents and the governor of the state, which is unfortunately becoming an issue? What does that look like? And because of the chaos and the lack of alignment, it's drawing people away from the job. Because you can have as much NIL initially as you want, but how do you keep the program steady? How does it work from a top to bottom level? The programs like Georgia and Alabama, what they have right, what makes them so successful, yes, it's the Kirby Smarts of the world. Yes, it's the facilities. Yes, it's the money. But all of that happens because the alignment is right between the Board of Regents, the athletic director, the president of the university, and the governor of the state, and whoever else is involved. And the donors, they all are on the same page as to what their mission is and how each of them contribute to the program. Issue for right now for Oklahoma State is it's kind of chaotic. Everyone's all over the place. Someone's offering $12 million here, someone's offering $2 million here, but they don't really know what it's going to. That type of thing. Right? So how does Oklahoma State get aligned? If they can align the program and everyone's on the same page and the administration is running smooth, then Oklahoma State's a top job in the Big 12, maybe the number one job in the Big 12. And I would argue close to SEC level in terms of money and resources and facilities, because those aren't issues for Oklahoma State. They never have been, especially with recruiting. The issue has always been development, coordinators, alignment. What is that for Oklahoma State? Well, leaves me a little bit of paper here because we have a lot to go over today. And the question is, how do coaches view Oklahoma State, right? Okay, For example, one thing that I can tell you is Alex Golesh's agency, the people that operate and agents that work for him and try and get him interviews or wherever else, really liked the Oklahoma State job. Liked it so much that they were trying to convince him Oklahoma State over Arkansas, Oklahoma State over even Florida, which is crazy. But Florida never was going to necessarily offer Golesh the job because they're looking for more of a P4 prominent coach. No risk taken, just like they went with Billy Napier. That's how high that people initially viewed Oklahoma State. Almost anyone was taking a phone call because of the resources that we were ponying up. Issue becomes, again, the alignment at Oklahoma State has been very poor. The department isn't working isn't very cohesive. Board of Regents is all over the place. President doesn't really seem to have a hold on athletics at all, which is leaving Chad Weidberg almost to run the ship by himself. And that's not promising for a head coach that has offers from Arkansas and potentially Auburn or wherever else. You may have the better resources, the better opportunity, the safer job, whatever it may be, but if your program kind of looks like chaos, it's going to be hard to convince people. That's kind of the problem with Oklahoma State's job right now is the resources are there, the opportunity is there, the security is there, the alignment isn't. Okay, gotta continue, because what does that mean, though, for Oklahoma State? What's the latest on the search? Where does it look like we're at? Let's talk Alex Golesh. I know that's what everyone wants, right? That's the dream. It was funny, before the head coach job started, we were kind of told Alex Golesh is a pipe dream. He's going to go to Florida. He's going to go to Penn State. He's going to go to whoever, Arkansas. And then when we started to learn, okay, Oklahoma State is actually ponying up a lot of resources here, and they're looking ultra competitive in this job search. They're looking maybe better than Virginia Tech. We passed on James Franklin. That's how confident we were about the whole situation. Not just that, but also, I don't think James Franklin, Oklahoma State would have made sense. Regardless, we were starting to look better and better, and then suddenly, you're hearing, okay, Golesh is actually super interested in this job. In fact, Oklahoma State might be his top option. They had an interview, and you heard from Cunningham, of course, went phenomenal. And we heard this a couple weeks ago when the interview occurred, that it was a 10 out of 10. And it kind of sounded like, okay, Golesh is going to be the next head coach of Oklahoma State. Then the alignment stuff starts to happen. He may or may not kind of be backing off, not really wanting to take the job because he's concerned about how that looks. So what is his interest right now? It's kind of uncertain. It's a little bit wavy, which is putting Oklahoma State in a really weird position, right? Because we promise recruits XYZ about when we would have a head coach. If we don't make that decision soon, then we're going to be in some trouble recruiting-wise. So now that he's out of the playoff picture, there's nothing really holding him back from necessarily saying yes or no. So that's a position with Alex Golesh. Interview was phenomenal, laid out a phenomenal plan for Oklahoma State football. Seemed like, man, this is like a dream match. He loves OSU, former grad assistant, has all the ties. So in terms of Alex Golesh, the interest is there. How much so right now, it's kind of murky. And this is the issue with the searching job, is ever since the Colin Klein situation, things have been a lot quieter in terms of looking into the inside of things. And that's credit to Chad Weidberg and his athletic department. They do really well at this, at selecting like who they want to give resources to and who they want to tell information. And, they're very internal about how their operations are. It was the same with the head coach basketball job where everyone was kind of virtually in the dark. It's becoming similar here. But there is enough to know. Seems like Golesh may be backing away from the potential of an Oklahoma State job. He is still, I would say, our top option. If we could choose anyone that's in our pool right now, and Alex Golesh was to put his hat as Oklahoma State and say, yes, I'm going to sign the contract now, that'd be our guy. So we'll see how that develops from here in terms of like getting everyone on board, getting the Board of Regents, getting the athletic director, getting the donors. And it's so hard because we only have a week to 2 weeks to try and figure this out. But yeah, that's where Alex Golesh is right now. Interviewed, went phenomenal. Would be my top option probably, but we'll get into that a little bit more. And that leaves us with Eric Morris. Okay, Eric Morris, man, this guy's interesting. Wow. So we were on Eric Morris before basically anyone else. Now everyone's on Eric Morris. Okay, he's 9-1, potentially going to the playoffs. Only loss is to Golesh, and might be our leading candidate right now in terms of a guy who would say yes without problems. But, and here's the big caveat, and this is where things start to get even more complicated. he's becoming more popular. He's becoming more of a hot commodity. I mean, this guy is proven. I mean, he's really becoming proven. 9-1 at North Texas. I mean, that's a big deal. Initially, it was kind of like we were his option, right? So in terms of P4, immediate success sort of thing. And I know a lot of fans want Eric Morris, and I do too. But let's kind of get into it. One, he's competing for the playoffs now, which delays his ability to say yes right now. You're not going to say no, or you're not going to say yes when your team is headed to the CFP in a week, right? So, or 3 weeks or whatever. So that delays it and puts us in a bad spot because we made promises, we made agreements, we want to have the job assigned by XYZ, by X date. So that kind of complicates things. He also seems to be marking all the right boxes, but he's a little bit more risky to us because he has no roots with Oklahoma State specifically, does have some Big 12 ties, and some bigger programs are starting to come onto the scene, which is making his contract and other things more competitive, which makes it complicated, obviously. And then again, we come into the issue of, is our alignment good enough to where we're wanting to say yes to this guy right away? Okay. Or he's wanting to say right to us. Okay, let's now talk about Kane Wommack from Alabama. This came up a couple of days ago. People are reporting that he's now a finalist for the job. I heard about this about a month ago, that Chad had been wanting to potentially go the SEC coordinator route. In fact, the word that I got was we may just take some out of left field SEC coordinator that no one's expecting. At the time, you're thinking, okay, Colin Klein's on the board. We're also looking at, can't remember his name off the top of my bat, but Missouri's offensive coordinator. We're looking some other routes as well. Even Clark Lee's name came up, the head coach of Vanderbilt at one point, but that was never going to happen. It just wasn't. And then we had Wommack now coming up from Alabama, DC, supposedly finalist. I personally haven't heard that he's a finalist for the job. Doesn't surprise me, though. It aligns with other things that I've heard. I heard his name previously about a month ago. I just didn't really see it happening because at the time, Alabama's defense had just, blown it to FSU a few weeks prior, and they weren't looking all too great. But now they look pretty good. Former head coach of South Alabama famously came into Stillwater and put belt to Gundy, as we, So is he a leading candidate, and why would we want to go that route? So like I said, about a month ago, I heard that Chad was wanting to make a splash hire, potentially SEC, just to show that Oklahoma State is competitive enough. Why? Potential that the Big 12 falls apart. There just is. There's a potential that the Big 12 falls apart, and having the SEC roots and proving that you can go and get SEC guys would be pretty good. Because if Wommack leaves, he probably takes a few SEC level defensive players with him. You can attract other guys that he has connections with in the SEC to Oklahoma State. It makes sense. Maybe not as proven of a guy as you would like. Doesn't have like an insane amount of head coaching experience outside of the South Alabama years. Had the 10-win season and then 2, 7, and 6 years. So that one isn't necessarily the greatest option for Oklahoma State, but he is a finalist supposedly. I haven't heard that, so I can't confirm whether or not that's true. Does not surprise me. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there's another SEC coordinator we don't even know about that has potential of becoming Oklahoma State's next head coach. Chad loves the idea of going SEC. That's just what I've heard. The AD, the athletic department, loves the idea of going SEC. That's why for briefly we were looking at like Gus Malzahn because he had the roots to Auburn, and other big names that would blow your mind that we had genuinely tried to have conversations with. The issue becomes, what's Oklahoma State's alignment? What is the vision here? Because Wommack could stay at Alabama another year probably, end up getting other jobs. So we'll see where that kind of leads. That one wouldn't shock me. If Kane Wommack became the next head coach of Oklahoma State, you nor I should have any surprise because of what's developing around the rest of the head coaching scene. Kane Wommack is a less sought-after candidate at the moment in terms of head coach. So that leaves the door open to Oklahoma State, especially with these other G5 guys that we've been approaching, or even other P4 guys that are becoming more popular at other places, like in Arkansas, or potentially in Ole Miss and in Auburn. With all the chain reaction that's bound to happen, it's making these guys who know they can get a job just about anywhere they want that opens more hesitant towards Oklahoma State, which leaves the door open for an SEC coordinator option like Wommack, which would be a great secondary option. Of course, we don't really know the specifics there, but that one sort of popped up when we got to the Colin Klein situation. Okay, so that was a top candidate for us for a while. I'm not sure he's still an option. Potentially is. It would be great. In fact, it'd be one of the best hires we can make. Issue is, Kansas State is awful. Kansas State is terrible. That's his dream job. He'd love to go be the head coach at Kansas State. Of course he would. Former quarterback, former offensive coordinator. Everything's aligned for them there. Whether or not they take that leap, I don't know. Colin Klein also is playoff bound, which impacts the schedule. The same thing with Wommack, probably playoff bound with Alabama. These things change things. Especially Klein will have to stay with A&M through the SEC championship at least. And even still, man, that makes things really complicated for Oklahoma State when the portal opens and we're not getting guys because Colin Klein's still recruiting for Texas A&M and hasn't said yes. I see that one becoming less and less optimal for OSU. Now, that said, he's still a candidate, and my goodness, what a hire that would be. So that leaves us with the NFL options, right? So we heard a few weeks ago a bunch of reports from On3 that Oklahoma State, and I had been talking about this, how the NFL options seemed less and less likely a few days prior. And then it was reported by On3 that Oklahoma State was no longer going the NFL route. We weren't going to hire anyone out of the NFL. The reason for that was the dates and the confusion there. Todd Monken said no, that's off the table as far as I know. As far as I know, I think Todd Monken has just straight up told Oklahoma State, sorry, no. So Ravens are back. I think they're doing pretty well now. I don't know. I don't follow the NFL super heavily. But he said no, most likely to Oklahoma State. Can't confirm that he absolutely did, but from what I have been told, it seems like he pretty much just told OSU not going to happen. Zach Robinson is the other NFL option that you've heard about. He seemed off the table a couple weeks ago. He's now the leading favorite in the betting odds again. And I know that some people don't want to hear this, but it seems to me like he's becoming more and more of an option again. He's had discussions, he's had interviews, he's gone as far as even discussing coordinator options with the athletic department. I can't go any further into detail than that as to what that looks like. But what I can tell you is Zach Robinson is an option for Oklahoma State again. Whether or not that becomes a thing, here's the issue. Zach Robinson has been reluctant to take the Oklahoma State job, and that's what pushes away from the NFL was the dating and the calendars and all that stuff. Why is he reluctant to take the Oklahoma State job? Alignment, Board of Regents issues. We can go all the way back to last year with the Mike Gundy situation where we were having discussions left and right, and then it didn't end up happening, and Gundy got stayed on staff and came into this year. And it just makes it chaotic and uncertain for someone like Zach, who has a shot at becoming an NFL head coach within a year to 2 years, and is in a pretty safe seat, in my opinion, as offensive coordinator of the Falcons. I know Falcons fans don't like him because they don't understand that their team is terrible. No disrespect. But in terms of that option, I believe it's still on the table. I know a lot of people are saying it's not. It seems to me like it's becoming more and more potentially viable for Oklahoma State, as much as people probably don't want to hear that. Sorry. Wish I could help you. Okay, those are the main candidates on the board for Oklahoma State right now, barring anything unexpected. Just to throw little like timber in the fire of names I've heard before. You know, the Missouri offensive coordinator. Gosh, I wish I could remember his name. So sorry about that. Malzahn used to be an option. He's no longer even considered. Same thing with John Gruden. For a brief period of time, Deion Sanders was mentioned. A crazy one was Lincoln Riley. I don't, with our issues, I don't see it. Eric Henderson from USC, the defensive coordinator, definitely still technically on the table. Whether or not that would end up becoming our head coach, I doubt it. I could see him end up becoming the defensive coordinator, though, just because he has great recruiting roots all across the country. Former Oklahoma State guy as well, so would be a good option. And names like that are kind of all over the place. I'm trying to think if I can think of a left field one that I've heard recently. Like, I think Dana Holgerson. Please, I think everyone can say no to that. I don't see Chad doing that unless all of our options sort of said no, which we may be getting there, unfortunately. We'll see how things develop over the next week to 2 weeks. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, names like that are kind of, like I said, left field. Colin Klein, we talked about already. So yeah, I think that's kind of where the head coaching search is at right now. There's a lot of potential people on the board. There's still, Silverfield from Memphis is a name, although I think he's probably going to go for a bigger job. David Taylor, UTSA, has been a name that's been popping up here and there. Yeah, so those are the type of guys to keep an eye on. Jim Knowles, that was the one. I haven't talked about Jim Knowles. So I know a lot of people I've been thinking Jim Knowles is an option. I don't see it as a head coach, unless a lot of people say no to us, unless we kind of run out of options. I think Jim Knowles is definitely on the table to return as defensive coordinator. Keep an eye on that. I'd love to see it in terms of becoming our next head coach. Look, it's possible. It really is. Jim Knowles could be the next head coach of Oklahoma State. Discussions have been had. It really heated up a few weeks ago between us and Knowles. But, man, that season at Penn State, I don't know. I don't know if that's enough to warrant, hey, even though you're probably not going to be the DC at Penn State next year, we'll take you as head coach. I don't know. Potentially coming back, though, on staff, I could see it. We'll see how that plays out. Okay. Next up is my personal top five of the options we've discussed. What does my list look like? And this was something that was asked on X, and I haven't really talked about it much other than like, hey, here's like my dream scenario for Oklahoma State, which was like Golesh, Zach Robinson, Jim Knowles. Not going to happen, I don't think. I mean, it would be great, but I don't think it's going to happen. So my number, we'll start at the bottom. So number 5 is anyone other than our top 4 options. Basically, I think we have 4 choices in the matter. Let's just say my number 5, for example, is like Jim Knowles. Someone that if everyone else that's in my top list says no, right? That's who I would want. So number 4 for me, and really, I this is because I really only have 4 true names that I want to be the next head coach of Oklahoma State football that I have heard that are realistic options, that wouldn't be Chad has gone out and performed a miracle and no one saw it coming like Steve Lutz, right? Okay, Kane Wommack's my number 4. A lot of people do not like this idea. A lot of people, in fact, are kind of disgusted by the idea that we're going to go and hire the defensive coordinator from Alabama, who's, what are they now, 8-2 or whatever, just lost to OU. God bless our neighbors. I don't know. So when it comes to Kane Wommack, I don't know why people don't like this hire. We're talking about a guy that went into South Alabama and gave them their best seasons in the history of the program with a 10-win year and a whooping in Boone Pickens Stadium, and had some serious athletes on that team. I'm talking serious, really good defensive players. Man, that team was good. That South Alabama team was dangerous, and he can recruit. Look what he's done with Alabama. They're doing great defensively. They're an awesome team. Kane Wommack is a great play caller. And, I mean, even look at OU. The only reason OU won was because the offense dumped the bag a little bit for Alabama. So I think Kane Wommack is a fantastic hire. Here's the issue. And this is what I was talking with someone about and why I was surprised. It's actually an extremely risky hire. While it could be fantastic, it's extremely risky because he did have 2 out of his 3 seasons were 7-6. 2 out of 3. But it was at South Alabama. He went 7-6, 10-3, 7-6. Regressed in his 3rd year when he honestly probably should have done better because they had a lot of returning talent and they were kind of a playoff watch. It's a media savvy hire as well. So it props us in terms of, hey, we went out and got one of the best coordinators in the SEC. How about that? That's a great job. But is he a good P4 head coach? There's no way to know. He obviously, one good thing is he was at Alabama for a year. So he got to learn what that program looks like, which still has a lot of Nick Saban dust behind in terms of structure. So he can bring that to Oklahoma State. That would be nice. So it's the SEC roots. It's a media popular hire probably. I think you get a lot of people talking about how we took him and how good of a hire it was. So here's the problem though. We'll have to wait until probably post-playoffs. Alabama is a national championship contender, right? So you could have to wait all the way through January. Horrible. No one wants that. And I think that's the big issue with Wommack and why, if he isn't willing to like take a step aside and start recruiting for Oklahoma State, which I don't think will happen, that's why I think he's less and less likely of a candidate, because Alabama is probably going to make a deep playoff run. And that puts us in a weird spot in terms of the timeline. And really, I think hiring a guy like Wommack, who's going to take a deep playoff run, it will set us back. It will set us back probably a full season. We won't be instantly competitive, more than likely. I could see like a 7-5 year type of thing. And you just don't want another year like that if you're Oklahoma State. You really do want to just start being competitive right away. Puts you in a weird spot. With all the money that's going to be spent as well, with the NIL and things, with the donors as happy as ever, you don't want to set back here. All right, number 3, Colin Klein. Now, I don't think that we're going to hire Colin Klein. In fact, I think it's highly unlikely at this point in time. Same reasons as Wommack. A&M's a national championship contender. Klein might actually prefer another Big 12 program over us, and he could eventually leave. Look, he's less proven as well. He's only been a coordinator. He's never been a head coach. He's dominating as an OC at A&M. Obviously, everyone knows that. They're having a phenomenal season. Big 12 roots, has all of that. But it's a risky hire because he's never been a head coach. He was at Kansas State and then only at A&M for a year. Kind of like Wommack, as we discussed. Yeah, you can bring over the things you learned at A&M, but A&M doesn't exactly have the greatest structure in the world as far as history tells us. Now, there's a chance Mike Elko's crushing it in their Alabama level and all that stuff, but only a season there, and Kansas State doesn't have a phenomenal structure as well. So it just, you don't know what he's going to bring to the table in terms of long-term success. So it's a risky hire. You have to wait until after the playoffs. That's why he pushes down on my list. But I do love his Big 12 roots. I love that he can recruit Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas. I love that. He'll be great regionally. Awesome offensive mind, obviously. Probably would stay. So there's a lot of good qualities with Colin Klein. Number 2 for me is Eric Morris. It's really 1A, 1B for me with Eric Morris and Alex Golesh. Eric Morris would just be an A++ hire. It just would be, even if it doesn't work, it'd be a phenomenal hire. Can recruit Texas, has Big 12 roots with Texas Tech, Washington State, and look, his team has scored 50+ in 3 out of the last 4 games. What else can I say? 50+ in 3 out of the last 4 games. Here's the caveat. He lost by like 4 scores to Alex Golesh's USF. 63-36, whatever it was. Dominated. The defense is iffy. He brings over some elite talent right away with their quarterback and everything, but we're going to probably have Haas Haney, so do we, do we really need that? So there's less roots to Oklahoma State, and he lost to my number 1, which is Alex Golesh. And that's really the only reason he's number 2, is he lost to Alex Golesh. He's turned around UNT in an unbelievable way, which is why it's like they're 1A, 1B for me. I would take either is fine. They have similar rises. They have similar recruiting abilities. Alex Golesh, though, used to be a GA at Oklahoma State. Knows the program, can recruit all across the country with Florida, Georgia, Texas. He's done it at USF. He can do it here. He'll bring immediate defensive and offensive talent. Used to be the coordinator at Tennessee, dominated as the coordinator as Tennessee. An incredible offensive mind as well. Here's out of the playoff picture. That's the other thing. So that's the reason Eric Morris is below as well, is because Eric Morris is in the playoff picture right now. He's 9-1, could potentially win the American, beat Tulane, go to the playoffs. That leaves us in the dust for another 2-3 weeks. Golesh is out. 7-3. USF team has done way above expectation this year. He's turned that program around really well. Could come working for us pretty much right away. Would be awesome. So that's my top 5. In terms of head coaching searches, which who really cares what my top 5 is? Some people wanted to know, but there you go. You've got it. So now it's time to answer some questions from you guys regarding the Oklahoma State head coaching job. So first question is, what would the OC/DC combo be? No idea. There's no way to know. It all depends on who gets hired. I can tell you that discussions have been had with certain coaches like Zach Robinson on OC/DC combos. They've been discussed. Eric Henderson, Jim Knowles. I don't know. So again, it's going to be up to the head coach that we hire in their specifics. My dream scenario would be Zach Robinson drops everything and be's our OC, and our defensive coordinator is Jim Knowles, and we hire Alex Golesh, and we ride off into the sunset as the best team in the Big 12. That's my dream. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. Next question is, when is a realistic time frame we find out? So I know the university kind of set a deadline for themselves, which was in no later than 2 weeks before Christmas, like December 3rd or so. it's becoming less and less likely it's going to happen. If it does happen, I'm concerned because we're probably going to rush a hire just to meet that deadline rather than be patient and just bite the bullet. Because for me, I would rather make the right hire and wait and take a guy who's in the playoffs and have to sacrifice a little bit of portal action and kind of be in pain there, lose out a little bit. Maybe it takes another season to rebuild. Then go spend $12 million to hire the next head coach with a $20 million buyout, and then he's terrible. That's not what I want. I want us to get the right hire, and I hope that we do that. But a timeline, at least initially, would be that we should hear who the next head coach is within the next week to 2 weeks. Whether or not that's the case, it depends on if we can get our alignment right and convince some of these guys that Oklahoma State, not only do we have the resources, we're banded together and we're going to make this happen. Next question is from OSU Zach. Shout out to you, Zach. How you doing, buddy? Said, press has said we should know the new coach by Christmas and the portal opens on January 2nd. But agents will be talking with teams immediately after the regular season ends. Should we be worried about being late on these discussions? I don't think so. We've been having discussions since Gundy got fired. We have been constantly on the ball. We've already had multiple interviews as far as I know. I don't think we're going to be late to any discussions in terms of the portal, if that's what you're asking. I can't tell if you're talking about the coach or the recruiting port in terms of the recruits. Yes, we could be late in terms of recruiting. And that's what's concerning, and that's why my list is the way it is and how I structured it, because of I want a coach in that fits all the criteria, being able to get in and immediately have these talks with recruits. However, if we go out and get like a splash hire from the SEC, some of their guys are going to enter the portal when he leaves and are going to come here anyway, and we'll fill some of those gaps. So I don't perceive it being a gigantic issue. And also in the NIL era, with the way it is, let's say a guy commits to, I don't know, Florida State, and we come in with a new head coach. He's like, hey, we've got $2 million extra, whatever. It probably won't matter. So I don't see it being a huge issue, but it's quickly becoming more possible that it does become one. So that's something to keep an eye on, that I would actually agree. Oklahoma State potentially could run into some timeline issues here, and we've talked about that throughout the podcast. But that's kind of the latest alignment. That's the big discussion. Can Oklahoma State put their pieces together between the Board of Regents, donors, and athletic department? Because right now it's a mess. Can they put it together and actually create something that a head coach is willing to say yes to? Because everything else is right. The money's right. The potential safety is right. The being able to dominate a conference and make the playoffs year in and year out is right. The NIL is right. Where does that leave us? Board of Regents, president, AD, donors, everyone has to get on the same page, align the university in a single mission, and we can hire just about any top candidate that's on our list. Thank you guys for listening to the Markcast. That's everything going on in the Oklahoma State head coaching job that I am aware of. Of course, I do not know everything. Make sure to continue listening to Carson and other individuals out there that are reporting on this independently. So, yeah, keep an eye out. Let's see what happens. Go Pokes.